Recording. 3 channels started.
Starting route to 15569 Union Avenue. Proceed to Innovation Drive, then take the first right. Starting route to 15569 Union Avenue. Starting route to 15569 Union Avenue. Head west on Innovation Drive.
Don't worry, as I said, it's just the drill. No one is being mauled by a polar bear.
At the next light, turn left.
I love it.
And as usual, Esme Stallard is here to discuss the big events from climate. Esme is the BBC's climate and science reporter. How are you, Esme? Been working on anything exciting, juicy?
I'm good. A little bit frazzled. It feels like it's kind of been non-stop in part due to what's going on in the US and also a lot of changes in the climate community over there. And actually, it links very closely with a story I've been following for the last couple of weeks about the Royal Society and Elon Musk, a strange combination.
At the light, turn left onto Zancro Road, then turn right onto Montague Expressway.
Society is.
So it's an institution based in the UK, and it's considered one of, or is the oldest scientific academy in the world, and considered one of the most prominent. Effectively, what its overall aim is to promote science globally. And once, occasionally, in a blue moon, they elect fellows, and these are people who are considered to be leading scientists in their field.
And Elon Musk was made one of these fellows, wasn't he? Why?
He was back in 2018 for his technological advancements or progress he made through Tesla and through SpaceX. This was a little bit...
At the light, turn right onto Montague Expressway.
...by the Royal Society to recognise those scientists operating more within the business community rather than just researchers, those in lab coats, effectively.
Right, okay. But now something's happened.
So some fellows raised concerns over Musk's behaviour for a couple of reasons. They thought he was spreading disinformation or allowing the spread of disinformation around scientific facts.
In about 2 miles, keep left.
They thought that he was not conducting himself in a proper manner as expected of fellows because of his attacks on another fellow who people might know called Anthony Fauci, who was the previous chief medical officer in the US administration, and then also more recently in his role while working at DOGE, which is this new US department for kind of finding efficiencies. So the Royal Society were effectively sort of pushed into a corner and were forced to call an emergency meeting, and that was on Monday night, and there was about 150 fellows in attendance. There are 1,700, so it's not the majority of them by any stretch, to discuss his behaviour and more generally their response to what is going on in the US. You know, there's been actions in terms of closing down funding NIH, which is research around healthcare. There's been impacts on NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in the US. That's the government body that does research around how our oceans function, and also the impacts of climate change and climate science are very important.
So what happened in that meeting?
Well, it's a very private meeting. Fellows were told not to discuss it with the press. They put out a statement effectively saying that they recognise that they need to do more to support the scientific community in the US and advocate for science. They haven't mentioned Musk in their statement, but I have spoken to a couple of fellows who are at the meeting and told me on condition of anonymity, because they're not allowed to talk to the press, that it was agreed that Elon Musk would be written to by the society and he would be asked to explain how he was upholding or supporting truth within science, and if he felt he was unable to do that, then he may consider his position. Now, effectively, this was kind of seen as a happy medium, if you like, between kicking Musk out but also expressing their unhappiness with the way that he's conducted himself. But fellows are not in agreement across the board. Some consider this an interference in politics, whilst others say it's not about politics at all, it's a question of ethics. What you can say under the law is very different from what you can say under their code of conduct, and you should be upholding truth, and some consider him not to be upholding scientific fact.
Yeah, I mean, Musk's achievements are quite impressive, though. You know, whatever you think of his politics, there's SpaceX, there's Tesla, you know, that reusable rocket landing back on its launch pad.
In 1 mile, keep left.
Impressive.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think in terms of his achievements, I think there is no doubt about that. Actually, I spoke to Professor Andre Geim, who is the Nobel Prize winner for physics, very renowned for being quite outspoken. And when I asked him about that, he said to me that Musk may be eccentric, but his achievements beat any of those of his critics in the Royal Society. So there are some that are big advocates for keeping him in it.
What has Elon Musk said about all of this?
Getting hold of Mr. Musk is very difficult, as you may imagine.
I don't have his number on speed dial,
his
then,
direct line. No, me and my colleague have been trying to contact Mr. Musk through his various different companies, Tesla, SpaceX. We even directly messaged him via Doge, but as of yet, no luck. And it was an interesting point that some fellows made. Do we actually think Mr. Musk would even care if he would be kicked out? But obviously, there is the optics around that and what that looks like.
Thank you, Esme. Now, do I see Caroline Steele loitering outside the studio? I think I do. Come on, Caroline.
Keep left.
Hi, come take a seat. Come join us.
Thank you.
Esme, have you met Caroline before? Have you two met? No?
No, we haven't, which is very strange because I feel like we do a lot of tag teaming where I'll hear her on a science podcast and I'll be on it the next week. So it's nice to actually be together on one.
Yeah, nice to finally meet you in person.
Yeah, well, so for anyone who doesn't know,
In 9.5 miles, turn right onto Union Avenue.
Science, where you answer listener questions all about science. And as you know, Esme is the BBC's science and climate correspondent. Last time you, Caroline, were on the climate question, you were talking about how you were going to Svalbard in Norway in the Arctic Circle. So how was it?
It was incredible. Genuinely, I think the most beautiful place I've ever been, which is impressive bearing in mind the sun didn't rise while I was there, but I could still make out these beautiful snowy mountains and yeah, just an incredible landscape and very, very friendly people.
Whilst you were there, though, you've been looking into the future of climate change's poster child, the polar bear, haven't you?
Yeah, so climate change is melting sea ice, which is having a huge impact on polar bears as they hunt most of their food, seals, on this ice. So they're being driven inland in search of alternative sources of food, which means they're more likely to run into people and their pet puppies, as Svalbard resident Gunhild told me.
This bear was a rather huge male that came slowly towards us. We could see that he was rising on his back legs, trying to get the fence down with his front legs, really putting his weight to it, wanted those puppies. So one of us ran out, making noise with pots and pans, and another person ran out trying to get the flare gun. It didn't work, so it was a bit stressful situation there.
Encounters with polar bears are becoming more common as the climate warms, and running into a polar bear is something Svalbard residents are constantly preparing themselves for. So they carry guns outside of the main town. They leave their houses and cars unlocked so anyone can escape a bear. And as I found out, the university centre there even runs a polar bear safety training course.
What is going on here, Caroline?
So a fake polar bear is being pulled by a snowmobile towards students on this course, and they're responding perfectly. They're putting their training into practice by yelling, banging things together and setting off flares, basically making as much noise as possible to scare the bear away.
It's now approaching slowly. It's kind of recognizing you and moving one step forward.
It sounds dramatic, but also vaguely humorous.
It was both of those things. As it was completely pitch black, the fake polar bear, to me, looked really quite real.
You
So,
sent me the video there and then, and I was pretty convinced by it as well.
and yes, didn't you respond saying you saw one? And I was like, no, Greg, that's made out of cardboard. So once the course was over, I headed to the Svalbard Museum to meet someone who's part of a study trying to better understand the impacts of melting sea ice on polar bears by having a look at their dens.
My name is Christian Solly. I'm working for Polar Bears International in the Arctic.
And Svalbard is a particularly important place for polar bears, is that right?
Yes, so it's very, very important for female pregnant bears. So they usually go in the den in November and then give birth around New Year. Polar bear cub at birth weighs about like half a kilogram, like roughly like 1 pound.
Yeah.
It's tiny, it's blind, hairless. So by the time they actually start going out, then the polar bear cubs weighs about 10 kilograms.
Right, okay, so the mothers need to be really nice and fat and healthy in order to be able to stay in the den all those months, basically fasting, no access to food, but also nursing their cubs. And they typically get nice and fat because of the seals you mentioned, and they eat loads of seals before they get pregnant. And seals live on the ice, and you said ice has declined in the Arctic. So does that mean there's less opportunity for seal snacks?
Yeah, exactly. And Polar Bears International in Svalbard wanted to see how fewer seal snacks impacts mothers and their cubs. So they put solar-powered cameras in front of dens and then filmed the bears as they emerge. So the research is focused on how long the bears hibernate for, what they do once they emerge, the condition they're in, so how much body fat they've got, and the survival rate of the cubs.
Due to loss of sea ice, there's fewer dens actually in the area. Also, fewer females get pregnant. After the female bears have been out on the sea ice mating in the spring or early summer, then the egg doesn't get implanted until the female body has enough body fat.
That's so clever. So female polar bears don't get pregnant unless they've got enough fat.
Exactly. So it's
That must be life-saving, because I guess if a polar bear got pregnant and wasn't fat enough, nursing the cubs would kill her, essentially.
Exactly. And knowing that she's fasting for almost 4 months while staying in the den, she needs to be in good shape because she cannot leave the den, go out and have a snack somewhere and come back.
The denning study also found that the mothers and their cubs are in worse condition when they emerge from their dens.
So that's why they're searching for food inland, in towns and villages, so there's more chance of interaction.
Yeah, exactly. And research in some areas of the Arctic finds that longer periods with no sea ice are linked to increasing conflict between humans and polar bears. Let's return to Svalbard resident Gunhild and the puppies. Luckily, someone came up with a clever solution to scare that polar bear away.
And then, all of a sudden, a third person of the group just ran out because there's a garage there. And of all things, there's a tractor. So he came out with the tractor towards the polar bear, and finally the polar bear ran off. But it was, I remember the moment. Your heart is like pounding, and it was quite stressful. But the polar bear ran off. Yeah, you do get creative. You just have to. That's how you survive.
Well, a happy ending for the puppies and that particular polar bear. But what about polar bears more broadly on Svalbard and beyond?
Yeah, melting sea ice is certainly really bad news for polar bears on Svalbard and in the Arctic more generally. Although I think it's worth saying that not all polar bear populations are declining. The Svalbard population is relatively steady for now, and that might be because the bears are recovering after a hunting ban. But other bear populations in similar environments to Svalbard are experiencing serious decline. And one paper published in the journal Nature predicts that if we continue with high emission levels, most polar bear populations could be extinct by 2100.
A sobering message then. Thank you so much, Caroline, for telling us about your trip.
Thank you for having me on.
A reminder that you're listening to The Climate Question from the BBC World Service. I'm Greer Jackson, and with me throughout the show is my fellow climateer Esme Stallard from BBC News. Hi. And now to
Germany, one of the most important countries in the world in terms of climate policy. Would you agree with me?
Absolutely.
Thumbs up, yeah. It's just had an election with the biggest voter turnout in 40 years. Friedrich Merz will be the country's next chancellor. He leads the centre-right party, the Christian Democratic Union. One of the big issues the new government will face is what to do with the coal industry. Germany still produces more of this fossilised fuel than any other country in Europe and has huge reserves remaining. It's a story my colleague Tim Mansell has been following for a few years now. Tim works on our sister BBC World Service programme Assignment and has been to Hambach coal mine near Cologne. And Tim, you sent me some pictures earlier and I was blown away by the scale of this. Were you?
Yeah, it's astonishing, isn't it? The first time I saw it, and I had to sort of say something spontaneous into my microphone, and I remember saying it looked like the Grand Canyon. It's 400 metres deep. That might be slightly hard to visualise, but if you dropped the Shard into it, the Shard is that enormous tower in London, it would swallow the Shard whole, and there'd still be another 100 metres of headroom. And the other thing about it is it's really become a tourist attraction, so they've set up a kind of lookout area on the edge of the mine. There are picnic tables and there are chairs and there are sort of metal-topped umbrellas, sunshades perhaps, and people come from all over just to gawp at this huge hole in the ground.
We are driving to Belgium and we made here a short spot for eating and drink a good German beer.
And why did you choose to stop here?
And this here it's a very incredible place from German history.
How does it make you feel to look at this hole in the ground?
I'm a little bit speechless. I hadn't think that it's so big here. I had the map on Google Maps and take a look where we can go, and I saw this big hole on the map and I say, hey, we have to go here, and it's incredible.
What was there before there was a big hole?
There was a huge forest, 4 villages, and a stretch of motorway. And this kind of mining is open cast mining. It means they just scrape off the surface layer by layer till they get to the coal underneath. So anything in the way just has to be removed. So 4 villages have already gone. And when I was there towards the end of last year, I went to a 5th village. It's called Marschnich. Today, the mine has crept to within perhaps a couple of kilometres of Marschnich. I was shown around by Bernd Sills. Bernd in his 50s. I remember he was wearing a Joy Division t-shirt. And we went to the house that he used to live in.
My mother was born in this.
Your mother was born in the house. I'll just describe it. It's a 2-storey house, red brick, get on the fence, and we can get through into the back garden. Oh, it's quite a sad sight. It's all boarded up. The ivy has run riot. How does it feel to look at the house?
Sad.
Sad.
Yes.
Right, I mentioned the vast ancient forest. The few hectares of trees that are left now have acquired huge significance. That last little bit of forest became the focus of attention for climate activists, not only in Germany but from all over Europe. The high point came in 2018 when on one day something like 50,000 people are reckoned to have been in the forest to protest against any more trees being cut down.
Okay, so I think it's fair to say this has been a real point of controversy, not just for Germans, but for Europeans. What's happening to the mine now?
So, the original plan was to keep digging coal until 2045, but in late 2018, the government in Berlin put together what came to be known as the Coal Commission, and it was their job to come up with a strategy for the future of coal mining in Germany. And all this, of course, in the context of climate change. And in their final report, the Commission said that Germany should stop generating electricity from coal by 2038.
So what does that mean for the Hambach mine?
The Commission added a specific recommendation on the Hambach forest. It said that it would be wünschenswert, that means preferable or desirable, if the forest or what's left of it was left in place. And of course that sent a very, very powerful political signal. So the knock-on effect of that was a decision by the state government that mining in this part of Germany would end not in 2045, but at the Hambach mine in 2029. Now, that's not what the mining company had planned on. It will be leaving more than 1 billion with a B, tons of coal in the ground.
So what does that mean for the village you visited and to Bernd, the Joy Division fan?
So that's the interesting bit, because with the mine closing 16 years earlier than originally planned, the mining company conceded that it would no longer need to knock Bernd's village down. And as you might imagine, that led to somewhat mixed emotions.
So what is Bernd going to do then?
I think he flirted briefly with the idea of moving back in, but he realised pretty quickly that wasn't feasible. Bernd moved out some years ago, along with most of his neighbours, and they've moved to a new village. That's what generally happens in a situation like this. The mining company buys your house, you take the money, you may have to take a loan out as well, and then you build a new house in a new village, and the villagers get to choose where that new village is and what it's going to look like. And Bernd played a very active role in that process. So this village has a completely different feel.
Yes, completely different. Yes.
We've driven from a village with a tradition going back centuries, and 5 minutes up the road we're in a village that's been here for less than 10 years. Everything is square, a lot of flat roofs, painted white. I think that must be the church back there with a spire that looks like a sail.
So sollte es aussehen.
That was the design. And this is a sign of the present, a sign of the future here. Already there are places where electric cars can be recharged. That's important. I don't think you would have found those in the old village.
No.
I rather like the idea of that. Tim, thank you so much. And you can catch Tim's assignment documentary wherever you get your BBC podcasts. It's called The Village That Came Back from the Dead. Now, Esme, we've been hearing about Tim in Germany, Caroline in Svalbard. Next time on The Climate Question, when we do a news programme, we're going to be hearing from you.
Stay in the middle 3 lanes.
Taking a boat to Rotterdam, aren't you?
It sounds like a very boring story, but I promise you it's not. So the energy system mentioned coal there has made a lot of progress in removing fossil fuels, but the two sectors that are probably struggling the most are aviation and shipping. And in fact, in the future, we're expecting them to make up the majority share of our emissions because we're still struggling to move away from the fossil fuels we use there. But after many years of discussion, we're expecting potentially next month the world's countries to agree to put a global tax on shipping fuel. And
In 1 mile, turn right onto Union Avenue.
Away from using polluting fuels to run them. So I'm going to Rotterdam, the port of Rotterdam, one of the largest ports in the world, to see what they're doing about it.
I will look forward to hearing all about that. Thank you so much, Esme.
I should say bon voyage, goodbye.
Bon voyage.
The production team this week were Simon Watts, Tom Brignall, Neil Churchill, and myself, Greer Jackson. We'll be back next week, as always, with another show. So I'll see you then.
Distribution of the BBC World Service in the United States is made possible by American Public Media, producer and distributor of award-winning public radio content. Engaging audiences, creating meaningful experiences, and fostering conversations. APM, American Public Media. With support from NetSpy, the security solution that global brands use to discover, prioritize, and remediate vulnerabilities so they can protect what matters. At netspy.com.
Next on the BBC World Service, Trump, Zelensky, and a roller coaster ride for global politics. Plus the man nicknamed
Go past this
Nature
lane,
Boy,
then
set
at the
up
next
before
one, turn right.
Song in Ireland, and the quadrobics craze explained. For those of you not on TikTok, the big online
At the light,
social media
turn right onto Union Avenue.
with me, Anna Doble, in Pick of the World after the news.
BBC News with Govinda Gill. France says it's giving Ukraine an additional $200 million.
In 1.3 miles, turn right.
Interest from frozen Russian assets. European countries are trying to make up for US cuts in aid to Kyiv. China's defended an increase of more than 7% in military spending as reasonable, saying the world is not a peaceful place. Its defense budget this year will be about a third of what the US spends on its military. Sudan has criticised South Sudan for allowing a hospital to be set up near their border. Khartoum fears the field hospital will serve as a base to supply weapons to paramilitary forces. State media in Syria say there have been clashes between the security forces and followers of former President Assad at the Banias power plant in Tartus. Syria's interim president has claimed the coastal region is under control.
In 1 mile, turn right.
From Syria, Turkey and Iraq are in Jordan for talks on regional security. Palestinian media say 2 people have been killed in an Israeli drone strike in Gaza City. Israel says a group of Palestinians were trying to plant bombs. The US Secret Service says one of its agents shot an armed man near the White House late on Saturday. They said the man had driven to the US Capitol from Indiana. Panama has released dozens of migrants who'd been held in a remote camp for weeks after being deported from the United States. Police in Kenya have fired tear gas to disperse protesters trying to occupy a church. It had recently been given a big donation by President William Ruto and had been criticised by Kenyans struggling with the high cost of living. The South African playwright Athol Fugard has died at the age of 92. He was best known for his politically charged plays challenging apartheid. That's the latest BBC News.
We gave you a stupid president $350 billion. We gave you military equipment, and you men are brave, but they had to use our military equipment. If you didn't have our military equipment.
Hello from the BBC World Service newsroom. I'm Anna Doble, and this is Pick of the World, the show in which your online clicks, plays, and shares decide what I talk about. Who was in the Oval Office and had a front row seat.
When would you say things started to go wrong?
There were a couple of moments. The first one that really stood out
Turn right.
to me was when President Trump sort of seemed to criticize President Zelensky for a hatred of Vladimir Putin, hatred being
Arrived.
President Trump's word.
You see the hatred he's got for Putin. It's very tough for me to make a deal with that kind of hate. He's got tremendous hatred.
And I think to a lot of the Ukrainian media, and slightly visibly to President Zelensky himself, he clearly, couldn't understand why President Trump wouldn't realize why he hates Vladimir Putin. And then, of course, there was the famous moment with the US journalist from a right-wing outlet criticizing President Zelensky's suit, or lack of suit, of course.
Why don't you wear a suit? You're the highest, why don't you wear a suit? You're the highest level in this country's office, and you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see if you own a suit?
Yeah.
A lot of Americans have problems with you not respecting the dignity of this office.
It was clear from that to me and to my colleagues as we were watching that President Zelensky did seem a little frustrated, maybe a little tired after the journey, we thought at that point, because of the way he sort of snapped back and said, I'll wear a suit after the war and it'll be cheaper and nicer than yours. We thought that maybe he would stop after the first of those 2 sentences, but that was where the tensions started to boil over and sort of become clear in what the people were saying, not just what the 2 presidents were showing in their body language.
What did it feel like then in the Oval Office as you started to see this change, this transition in the tone, and it devolved into an argument?
Yeah, I think everyone was stunned. It was really when J.D. Vance intervened and accused President Zelensky of not being thankful and not being grateful enough.
And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States